People attend training and there's no noticeable difference when they return. Training is not cheap either, and it's about $1,500 to $2,500 per employee per year. To what extent is it working as intended? Training itself often does work. People do learn, but whether that learning actually shows up back on the job is highly inconsistent. So in other words, the biggest problem isn't the quality of the training, it's the transfer. And there's an assumption that information equals doing. So managers aren't equipped or available to reinforce it. Also, measurement stops at attendance, not at application. Adults don't change because we were taught something, he said. We change because we need something. If it doesn't itch, people won't scratch. Learning without application is just trivia. And so an easy way to remember is the LEARN framework. Not lectures, loops. Make it small, make it safe. Welcome to Lead to Grow, the podcast where we explore the people principle, how human success drives business performance. I'm your host, Tommy Sim, and today we're going to explore the topic of training and development, including why many training efforts fail to achieve the intended result, how adults really learn, and what you can practically do to achieve a better return on your investment. The idea that people perform better when they've been properly trained is not something new, nor complex to understand. We see it in all parts of life, whether that's in sport, music, cooking, and of course work. The problem is that many efforts to provide training to staff often don't meet the mark. People attend training and there's no noticeable difference when they return. Or the outcome from 2 days of training is that there's like one simple insight that could have been gained from, say, reading an article for 20 minutes. Or they continue doing work the old way despite being trained the new way. Or, worse yet, they say they've not been trained on something when you could have sworn that you directly conducted training with that person on that very topic. Training is not cheap either. In many cases, we're talking like a day or more away from work to complete it, and in some cases, thousands of dollars spent on the training itself. So if you're not one of those managers who blindly sends people on training hoping it will fix them, and have asked the question, is the spend on training really worth it? Then you might find the time spent on today's episode brings you a good return. So why does this matter? Let's start with how much we spend on training just purely based on external costs, and that's not including internal training that's not invoiced, but costs in terms of the time spent. Now, I looked at various pieces of research, and it's about $1,500 to $2,500 per employee per year the company spent on external training. And if you add the time spent, this figure is even greater. And now, importantly, the amount we spend on training is actually less than the expected benefits, because otherwise, why did we spend the money? Now, one of the most widely cited reviews in this space was done by researchers Grossman and Salas. They looked across decades of training research and found something really important. Training itself often does work. People do learn, but whether that learning actually shows up back on the job is highly inconsistent. So in other words, the biggest problem isn't the quality of the training, it's the transfer. And without things like manager support, opportunity to apply new skills, and the reinforcement in the workplace, even the best designed training regularly fails to deliver meaningful performance improvement. So the research doesn't say that training never works. It says that training only works when the conditions around it are right. In my experience, a lot of training is simply information sharing. Now, this happens for a few reasons that are kind of understandable. First of all, it's the fastest way to scale knowledge. When a business is growing or under pressure, pushing that information into a room or a slide deck, it kind of feels like the most efficient way. One person talks, many people listen, job done, at least on paper. And there's an assumption that information equals doing. Many leaders genuinely believe that if people are at least equipped with that information on how they should perform the job, then that performance will follow. And it's kind of a reasonable assumption, it's just often wrong. So managers aren't equipped or available to reinforce it. Behaviour change lies and dies in the day-to-day. But many managers just haven't been trained, given time, or held accountable for reinforcing that learning after the session. Also, measurement stops at attendance, not at application. So if success is defined as people completing the training, then that information delivery is enough, right? There's often no real pressure to design for impact beyond the session. It also feels safer and less confronting. So information sharing avoids the harder conversation about expectations, about standards, and accountability. It doesn't require people to practice, to be observed, the dreaded role plays, or potentially fail in front of others. The result is that there's a lot of time, money, and energy spent on training without achieving that desired result. And this leads to a lot of frustrations for managers who continue to battle with a team that is not sufficiently skilled or knowledgeable to perform their roles at a level that allows that manager to take their step back and not be stuck in the day-to-day work of their team. Now let's pause for a moment. Before we get into the ideas, I want to tell you a story. Not because it's dramatic, but because it's familiar. It's a story of a capable manager who does all the right things, or seemingly so, investing in training, setting people on courses, genuinely wanting her team to grow, but finds herself wondering why little actually changes. This isn't a story about bad training or bad people. It's about a gap that most of us don't notice until we're living in it. The gap between learning something and becoming different. And it captures why that gap exists and what starts to change when a leader stops thinking in terms of courses and starts thinking in terms of learning. A winter evening in the city. Office lights hang like constellations in glass. Maya sits at her desk, blue light on her face, jacket over the chair, coffee gone cold. In her inbox, strategic influence bootcamp, early bird discount. She smiles, then sighs. She sent half a team to programs like this. They came back energized, and a week later, nothing changed. She closes the laptop and catches her reflection in the window. Tired eyes, capable woman, a manager who cares. Maybe the issue isn't what we teach, she thinks. Maybe it's how we learn. She grabs her bag, steps into the corridor, fluorescent hush, and makes herself a promise before the lift door closes. I'm going to find a different way. 2 mornings later, a laneway cafe. Exposed brick, steam on the window, clatter of cups. Maya meets Ravi, late 40s, stillness in the shoulders, the kind of leader who never raises his voice because he doesn't need to. Your team changes, Maya says, wrapping both her hands around her mug. Mine learns, then reverts. What am I missing? Ravi smiles and stirs his long back. Adults don't change because we were taught something, he said. We change because we need something. He sketches a quick list on the back of a receipt. Knowles, the adult learning guy, he nailed this years ago. He says, adults bring experience into every lesson. They want autonomy. They care about relevance, and they're problem-centered, not content-centered. Motivation is mostly internal, and they want to know why before they try. May leans in. So training works when the problem is mine, not the facilitator's. Ravi nods. If it doesn't itch, people won't scratch. Make that itch real. She writes in a notebook, block letters pressed deep into the paper. Adults learn when the problem is theirs. They talk application, framework as solvable problems, not modules, letting people pull learning instead of pushing slides. When they stand, Ravi taps the notebook. Point learning at live problems. Everything else is garnish. May steps back into the bright winter sun with a clearer picture and a steady pulse. She's determined now. Not just curious, she's committed. Glass meeting room, afternoon glare. Maya sits with Jake, mid-30s, quick mind, quick guard. A client detail slipped again. Walk me through your prep, she says gently. He crosses his arms. I get it, Maya. It won't happen again. She tries another angle. What do you think is getting in the way? I'm doing my best, he says. I can't be perfect. The air hardens. She thanks him. The meeting ends early. The paper feels loud when she gathers her notes. That night at the kitchen table, her teenage daughter Ella is hunched over her chemistry homework, hoodie up, one earbud dangling. Maya asks a question, mainly just a vent. Why do smart grown-ups shut down in feedback? Ella, without looking up, says, Miss Blakemore says adults are basically teenagers with bills. Maya replies, who is that? I thought I heard of all your teachers. Ella swivels her laptop. Sarah Jane Blakemore. She's not my teacher at school. She's a professor from Cambridge who studies the adolescent brain. During the teen years, the prefrontal cortex remodels. Planning, social cognition, and we get super sensitive to social evaluation. That sensitivity doesn't magically vanish at 20. So you know how you say I won't care what people think when I get older? It may not be as soon as you think. Maya smirks, ignoring the slight jab. This girl is too smart, she thinks. She decides to stay curious, turns her head and gives a slight squint. So when I give feedback, their brain reads threat more than help. Ella shrugs. If it feels like judgment, it hurts. Same circuitry that glows for physical pain lights up for social pain. People avoid that pain. Maya writes on a sticky note, avoiding embarrassment does not equal learning. She sits back and sees two things at once, Jeg's folded arms and her own. Learning isn't blocked by ignorance, it's blocked by ego protection. 3 weeks on, a resignation lands hard. Tess, thoughtful, high potential. It's not about money, Tess says in the small meeting room, eyes kind. I just don't feel like I'm developing. Maya holds the smile until the door clicks, then she sits very still. I don't get it, Maya reflects, pen to mouth. She attempts to write down how to make sense of it. We provided her with loads of opportunities to attend training. She just wasn't ready for that next step. It took me many more years to get that opportunity when I was her age. She feels a career pivot in her sternum. Next morning, in a clattery corner booth with Ben, her old mentor, now performance coach. Ben is all elbows, black coffee, and ink-stained fingers. He pulls a napkin and draws a staircase. You're trying to remove pain, he says, but the pain step is where learning lives. He draws a diagram showing the steps. Unconscious incompetence. This is blissful ignorance. At this stage, we don't know what we don't know. Step 2 is conscious incompetence. The sting of, oh, I can't do this. It's a shot to our ego sometimes, but it's essential to acknowledge before learning takes place. Step 3 is conscious competence. At this stage, it's effortful, clunky, but it's working. We need a good amount of brain power to perform that task. And finally, unconscious competence. This is when it becomes automatic. We can do it with ease. It becomes who we are and just how we do things. People often want to jump from the basement to the penthouse, Ben grins. But there's no express lift. Your job isn't to rescue them out of step 2. It's to make it safe enough for them to stay there. He flips the napkin and draws 3 circles. 70, 20, 10. Most real learning comes from doing the work. That's the 70. Another 20 comes from coaching and feedback. The formal training, that's the 10. From what you've told me, you've poured your heart and soul into the 10 and hope the rest would take care of itself. Maya traces the circles with her fingertip. So, she says slowly, I need to lower the threat without removing the discomfort. Ben nods. Exactly. Too much protection and nothing changes. Too much exposure and people shut down. What you're aiming for is small failures in a safe environment. Enough to sting so it matters, but not enough to do damage. He taps the napkin. And when people apply new knowledge in small, real ways, that's when the progress starts. Maya looks up. The pieces are clicking. So my job is to help them see the need for change, introduce the right knowledge at the right moment, make it feel okay to try, and give feedback that helps rather than hurts. She smiles. That's not a straight line, is it? Ben leans back, removes his glasses. Nope, learning is a loop. Maya writes the words, learning loop, in big block letters, circling them again and again until the pen leaves a groove in the paper. The next afternoon, late sun cuts through the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning the meeting rooms amber. The office has hit that end-of-day quiet. People are packing up, shoulders easing. Maya slows as she reaches Jake's desk. Hey, she says, keeping her tone light, can I run something past you? He looks up, neutral, guarded. She hears her old mentor Ben's voice in her head. Keep the pain small, but keep it safe. I've been doing a bit of thinking about how I support learning in the team, she continues. And I've realized that I probably jumped to fixing things too quickly. That gets his attention. I'm trying to understand people's thinking before I offer help, she says. Not to catch anything out, just to see how it looks from your side. There's a pause. Tomorrow's client call, she adds. Would you be open to walking me through how you usually prep? Even if we don't change anything, it would help me learn. He shifts his chair, hesitates. Okay, he says finally, yeah, we can do that. They move to a meeting room. The light is softer there. She starts by listening and looking. He talks her through his process, the documents he checks, the notes he skims, the way he plans the agenda. He explains that he's trying to be efficient, to respect the client's time, to make the call feel purposeful. Maya listens without interrupting. No pen, no reframing, just tracking his logic. So you're trying to set things up so the call feels tight, she says carefully. Like you're giving them confidence early that you know where this is going. He nods. Yeah, if I don't get a good start, the whole thing drags. She lets that land. She begins to focus on exploring. Okay, she says. When you think about a good start, what are you aiming for in those first few minutes? He thinks, well, momentum. I want them engaged straight away. And when it works, she asks, what do you notice they're doing? They're leaning in, they're asking questions, he says. Maya nods, still with him. So when you jump in early, she continues, that's you trying to create that engagement. Exactly, he says. She pauses, then she asks the next question, still inside his intent. And when you don't get that engagement, she says, what do you think tends to happen right at the start? He exhales. I think I talk too much. I'm trying to carry it. And how does that feel? Like I'm dragging them uphill. The silence stretches, not awkward, just thoughtful. So, Maya says gently, if your goal is engagement and momentum, what else might you help get that in the first few minutes? He looks up, slower now. I could get them talking earlier. How? Ask them what success looks like before I get into the recommendation. Maya smiles, but doesn't say good just yet. The next thing she does is adapt. Why don't we try that? She asks. Same goal, just a different opening. How about I be the client? He gives it a go. It's clunky, he over-explains, they stop. He tries again, shorter, quieter. That felt different, he says. What was different? Maya asks. I felt I wasn't pushing. I was listening. She nods. They're focusing on rehearsing. After the call tomorrow, she says, could we grab 2 minutes? I'm curious whether that opening actually gave you the momentum you were looking for. The ask is small. It's aligned. It's his goal, not hers. The next day, he catches her near the kitchen. You were right, he said. Then he stops himself. I was right. She smiles, waiting. Slowing the start helped, he said. Once we worked out what success looks like, everything just flowed. And what did you notice, she said? They stopped pushing back. I think they felt more heard. Maya nods, says nothing. She doesn't need to. Over the next week, he keeps coming back. Not for answers, but for calibration. Can I run a different opener past you? Does this question still get at the outcome, or am I drifting? I tried it with a tougher client, but I had to adjust it. Each time the pattern is the same. He tries, reflects, tweaks, and tries again. She resists the urge to add too much. The reflection is enough. The questions are sharper, the pause is more comfortable, and the calls are less effortful. Now they get to nail it, not by perfecting it once, but by earning the learning loop. A fortnight later, in a team meeting, someone mentions a client call that went sideways. Jake leans forward. Can I share something that's helped me? He says, glancing briefly at Maya. I realized I was jumping to solutions too fast. Now I start by asking 2 things. What does success look like for you? And what's getting in the way right now? It's changed the whole tone of my calls. The team starts asking questions. He answers easily, not quoting a framework, not repeating training content, just describing what he's learned by doing. Maya sits back and watches. This is the moment she's been missing for years. Not compliance, not enthusiasm, it's that capability that travels. Later, as they walk out together, she says, you've made that on your own. He shrugs, smiling, I guess I had to. That night, she adds a final line to her notebook. Learning isn't complete until it's shared. And for the first time, the idea of development doesn't feel theoretical. It feels alive, moving through the team one loop at a time. Maya is attending an evening peer coaching circle in an old gymnasium. Stackable chairs, scuffed floorboards, tea and paper cups, people with the same tired hope in their faces. The facilitator stands near a faded basketball hoop. Quick story from Harvard, she says. Amy Edmondson studied hospitals. Units that reported more errors sometimes had better outcomes. Why? There's a pause. Then someone pipes up from the back. Mid-40s, sharp blazer over jeans. Arms crossed, half smile, already loaded. Because there were worse hospitals, he said. A few people chuckled. He shrugs, enjoying it. More errors, because they made more errors, more mistakes. The facilitator lets that moment hang. Maya leans forward, elbows on her knees. Or, she says steady, because people felt safe enough to speak up. So errors surfaced earlier, and the team could actually do something about them. The room quiets, heads nod. The smart Alex smile fades, just a touch. The facilitator smiles. Exactly. Psychological safety didn't reduce mistakes, it increased learning speed. Maya writes in her notebook, slow and deliberate. Safety doesn't equal comfort, safety equals learning speed. Back at work, the next handover goes sideways. Old Maya would have jumped right in, fixed it, reassigned and moved on. New Maya takes a breath. Before we get into fixes, she says, I want us to consider something. If we can squeeze the most learning out of what just happened, this might still end up being a net positive, even if it didn't go to plan. A few people shifted in their chairs. So let's start not with who got it wrong, she said. Let's start with what it taught us. Silence. Then slowly, Jake says, next time I'll confirm the brief in writing. Priya nods. We assume the timeline. We should check it earlier. May looks around. Good. What's one small thing each of us will do differently next time? Pens move. The room exhales. The loop tightens. That evening, walking home, May replays the meeting. One moment keeps surfacing. She interrupted Priya again. No one had said anything. Of course they hadn't. The next day she catches it as it's happening. The urge to jump in. The steer to finish the sentence. She stops herself. Sorry. Finish your thought, she says. It's small, almost invisible. But Priya looks up, surprised, and keeps going. Maya notes it later on. Most blind spots aren't solved by just asking for feedback. They're solved by being able to notice yourself in real time and choosing differently. That afternoon, one-on-one with Jake. I'm trying to improve how I support learning, Maya says, so I might try a few things that feel a bit different. If something's working or something's not, I'm interested. He nods, neutral, guarded. They talk through his work. No big moment. They're wrapping up, she adds almost casually. Out of curiosity, when feedback has worked for you in the past, what was different about it? He shrugs. Hard to say. She leaves it there. A few days later when they're walking back, he asks, when you asked me that question about what works with feedback, I had a thought about it and I feel like it's when I don't feel like I'm being left behind. May takes note. That's useful to know. And she writes that down. 2 weeks on, Jake misprices a quote. No deflection, no hiding. He flags it early, fixes it, and later debriefs himself. I won't do that again, he says, half laughing. I know exactly where I rushed. Maya feels it. Pride, relief, a warm click of new wiring. It stung, but it didn't spiral. She remembers a paper she once skimmed. When learning carries emotion, embarrassment, ownership, relief, the brain flags it as important. Memory consolidates more deeply. In plain English, we remember what we feel. Now she doesn't need to explain it. She can see it, not in confidence or enthusiasm, but in changed behaviour. Quarters end, whiteboard packed with life. Ravi's bullet list, Ben's staircase, circles marked 70, 20, 10, scribbles from role plays, a poster that reads, ask before tell. In the middle, in thick marker, is action plus reflection equals learning. Too much thinking, not enough doing, you're stagnant. Too much doing, no reflection, you repeat mistakes. The multiplier is the loop. The proof isn't a dashboard, it's the ambient sound of the team. More questions, shorter debriefs, fewer defenses, faster fixes. Weeks later, another marketing email pings. Strategic Influence Bootcamp. New format. Maya smiles, deletes it, and opens her calendar. New meeting. 2-minute debriefs. What did we learn last week? Because she knows now growth doesn't come from a course. It comes from a loop. Now this story goes on, but let's step out of it because I want to highlight a few key learnings. Before we go any further though, I want to clear something up because this is where people often mishear the message. This is not an argument against new knowledge. People absolutely need information to grow. For instance, you can't coach someone into a skill they've never seen. You can't reflect your way into knowledge you don't have. And you can't expect better performance if people don't actually know what good looks like. What the story shows isn't that information is useless. It's that information on its own isn't enough. So let's pull out what was really happening. First, new knowledge still mattered. Maya kept learning about adult learning, about the brain, about skill development, but that knowledge didn't arrive as a course as such. It arrived just in time in response to a real problem that she genuinely cared about. That's principle 1. Information works best when it has a job to do. Second, every idea was pointed at real work, not hypotheticals, not someday. It was client calls, mistakes, conversations that already mattered. That's why it didn't evaporate. Learning without application is just trivia. Third, and this one's subtle, the coaching always started with intent. Maya didn't correct Jake. She understood what he was trying to achieve and worked from there. That matters because the moment you override that intent, people defend instead of learn. Fourth, psychological safety wasn't declared, it was demonstrated. She explained her intent, she slowed herself down, and she changed her behaviour before asking for feedback. Safety isn't what you say, it's what people experience over time. Fifth, discomfort wasn't removed. Threat was. People were allowed to struggle. They just weren't allowed to be embarrassed and punished for it. Small failures, safe environment, and real progress. Sixth, learning didn't happen in a straight line. It happened in loops. Try, reflect, adjust, repeat. That's why one conversation didn't change everything. Repetition did. 7, reflection acted as a multiplier, not as a substitute. Short pauses, 2-minute debriefs, simple questions. Reflection didn't replace action, it amplified it. And finally, learning was complete when it traveled. When Jake could explain it in his own words, use it in new situations, share it with others. That's capability, not compliance. So if you zoom right out, the pattern is simple. People develop when they get the right information aimed at a real problem, applied in real work, reflected on briefly and honestly, and repeated until it becomes habit. Miss any one of those and learning is going to stall. That's why so much training disappoints, not because it's bad, because it stops halfway. And that's where the Learn framework comes in handy. L is listen and look. Observe, understand the intent and context. E is explore, make sense of the problem together. A is adapt, introduce and try new ideas. R for rehearse, apply them safely. N is for nail it, repeat, refine and share. Not lectures, loops. Make it small, make it safe. Let the loop do its work. That's enough thinking for today. I'll let you get back to it. I'm Tommy Sim, and this is Lead to Grow. Now, if you found this episode useful, feel free to share it with someone who might get value from it. If you're watching on YouTube, you can like the video and subscribe to the channel to see future episodes. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can follow the show. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, a 5-star rating or a short review really helps more people discover it. New episodes come out regularly, and I hope to see you in the next one.